Hello, everybody. So today, before I get started, I'm gonna mention One Step from Eden. I've kind of stopped recording for One Step from Eden because I was trying to do Hell Pass 14 runs, but those, like the majority of the runs, just ended abruptly, and I didn't know what to do with the footage. And eventually, I just got tired of it. Like I didn't want to deal with the constant recording and deleting. It was just a pain, and ultimately, it kind of made me lose interest in recording for that game. So, anyway, today we're going to be looking at all the Hellhorned cards in Monster Train. And this is going to be the first part of a probably a 6-part series because I'm kind of planning on looking at the artifacts as well. But let's get into this. There's a lot of cards in this game, so we need to hurry up. So, I'm almost done getting Covenant 25 wins with every pair. Unfortunately, some of these are real stinkers. I think of the ones I got left, this is going to be the easiest, but these three are just stinkers. Stygian and Melting Ram actually have anti-synergy, which really sucks. So let's get into the cards. Starting with the Hornbreaker Prince, who is our champion, and they recently buffed him. He used to have some very serious problems, but he's a lot better now. So his brawler form, the extra armor definitely helps. However, I do still think his brawler form as an all-in is a little bit underwhelming. It can do good damage, but you need setup for this. Like, he can't set up himself, he needs help. Reaper, I think, is his best form because previously he never quite got there with the damage. Like, he didn't quite have enough base damage to get the ball rolling, but now he does, and he's really, really good. Wrathful, I think, is really good before Covenant 15, but post 15, this is just not good enough. I'm not totally sure what to do with him on 25 because he doesn't make sense as a frontliner because he's not quite tanky enough baseline, and he's never going to get slays against some of the late game stuff. And as a backliner, he doesn't make sense because you're not doing anything with the armor or the rage. He's just a 40-40 or whatever his base stats are at that point. So usually I end up taking some combination of Reaper and Brawler with him. Usually 1 point in Reaper, 2 points in Brawler. Or no, other way around. 2 points in Reaper, 1 point in Brawler. This gets you the armor from Brawler, as well as multi-strike. And ultimately, the damage scaling and base damage is the same on these. However, with 1 point in Brawler and 2 in Reaper, we get better benefit from other stuff that scales up our damage, and we get the free armor, which is a really big deal. So, moving on to cards, we're going to do these in order of rarity. And we're starting with Vent. So Vent, it does 2x damage to enemy units. This is a single hit, so it's going to do 1 hit of 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever, to everyone on the floor. Now, AoE effects like this are important at all stages of the game. The breaking point numbers against humans, like the clergymen, the little crossbowmen, against those dudes, you need 1 damage. Against the clipped, you need 3 damage, and against the winged, you need 5 damage. If you're not able to hit these breaking points, you're going to have some serious problems. So Vent is really good in the early game by itself. This is a card I will take pretty highly in the early game if I don't already have a lot of good ways to deal with backline trash. In the mid game against the clips, it starts to fall off a little bit, and in the late game it becomes a lot worse. Now, usually the play pattern with Vent is either you start with it because it's common, and I forgot to mention common cards you're pretty much guaranteed to see all of these cards at least once whenever you do a Hellhorned run. Same with all the other factions. They're common cards. So usually either I'll start with 2 vents or I'll see a vent very early, like first or second fight. And unless I already have some very, very good ways to do AoE, I'll take vent pretty highly. I'll especially take it over stuff like Fledgling Imp, Ritual Battle. We'll get to Ritual Battle later. I like this card quite a bit. You take it early, and then at the earliest opportunity, you slap plus 10 magic power on it, and now it's just 0 mana to clear the floor of all the backline trash. It's great. Now, you do really need the 10 magic power on it, because if you don't put the magic power on it, you're going to run into kind of a problem once you start getting into the fights against Eclipsed, because against them, you generally need 2 or 3. Well, actually, against Eclipsed, it's still fine. It's against the Winged that this starts to become really bad, because most trash backline units there have 5 HP or 3 HP, so you would need to put 2 or 3 mana into this to get the desired effect, which just isn't worth it. So you really need that 10 magic power on it. But when you do get the 10 magic power, this is essentially 0 mana clear to backline, which is super valuable. So I think this is one of the better commons for Hellhorned. Next up we got Fortify. 0 mana, apply 5 armor. So armor as a whole, I don't generally think about the synergies. There are some synergies, like Battering Ram cares about armor, and the one artifact cares about armor. I think it's the hammer, the one that gives you extra armor whenever you apply armor. So Fortify, it's just pretty standard card. It helps keep your units alive. You can use it on your backline stuff to stop it from dying sweep. You can use it on your frontline stuff to make it more resilient. You can use it to trigger incant stuff, which we'll get to in a later video. This is a very good card on Hellhorned Stygian. It's just an overall versatile card. The big thing with it is it's a 0 mana card, so it effectively reduces the average mana cost of your deck. So the thing with 0 mana cards is you shouldn't take too many of them, and if you do have a lot of them in the deck, suddenly card draw becomes way more valuable. Card draw is something that Hellhorn cannot do, so keep that in mind. I would take this card. I'd take it over most imps. I'll say that much. But overall, it's just an okay card. It's nothing too flashy. It helps a little bit if you're having mana trouble, since it's free. And it's just a bogline standard card. It helps keep your stuff alive in the back, and it helps make your frontline stuff a bit more resilient. Next up, we got Fledgling Imp. So imps in general, I'm not a fan of, because they're just too awkward to use with the space requirements. So the Fledgling Imp applies Rage 3 to friendly units. That's 6 attack on the turn you play it. Fledgling Imp is particularly good if you have other imps on the same floor. Like if you have one frontline dude and a bunch of imps behind him, and or even you just have a welder helper and friends, and you put another one behind it. That's pretty tanky too. And then you put a bunch of imps behind it there, and then you put a Fledgling Imp or 2 down, and suddenly all the imps are doing decent damage. It's okay in that case. This is a card I never really take from a draft pick. Usually this ends up in a deck either because it started there, or I'll pick up an Imp Sickle at some point and I get Fledgling Imps off that. Imp Sickle is an entirely nerd thing that we're going to have to talk about eventually, because it's a, like, The thing with imps is when I talk about them, I do have to keep Imp Sickle in mind, but I won't talk too much about Imp Sickle because I'll eventually be talking about that in another video. Fledgling Imp, it's okay. It's not great. It kind of gets better the more imps you have. However, this critical mass of imps is questionable in of itself. I don't really ever take this card. Usually I just end up with it in the deck to begin with. Next up, we got Hidden Passage. I think Hidden Passage is actually one of the best cards in the game. So, 1 mana, ascend a unit. Any unit. Your units, the enemy units, this lets you get around the space or the capacity limits, which is great. This lets you stagger enemy units in a more reasonable way. Like, there's just so much you can do with this card. It's absurd. I've never taken Hidden Passage and not had it be spectacular. So let's go down a short list of stuff you can do with this. The first and most obvious way to use Hidden Passage is you use it to stack your units up onto a single floor. I do not recommend doing this against Sap Seraph because then you're going to run into some problems with him. But if the final boss is not Sap Seraph, this is a great strategy. And it's one of Hellhorn's kind of better scaling options because when I think of what Hellhorn brings to the table, Hidden Passage comes to mind immediately. Next, you can use this to stagger enemies, which is also great. So if you're setting up on top floor, you draw this turn 1, you set some dudes up on top floor, and the first pack of enemies is like 2 moderately tanky guys. What you can do is you can ascend one of them so that you only have to deal with them one at a time, and this helps with the damage immensely because it gives your units more time to dish damage out onto the enemy units instead of having to wait for them to get all the way to the top, which takes 2 full turns. Now you wait 1 turn and one of them shows up, and then the next turn the other one shows up, which is really great. Now, the last really big notable thing you do with Hidden Passage is there are the dudes who have 0 attack, a little bit of HP, and a ton of armor, and they always show up in the front. And those guys can really suck to deal with because if you end up with something like a Steel Wing and 2 Gilded Wings behind him, what are you going to do? Well, this is what you're going to do. You're going to Hidden Passage the Steel Wing, and he's going to go to the back of the floor above him. And then you just don't have to worry about him anymore because since he has 0 attack, when he gets to the pyre, he's not going to do any damage to it. So this essentially just insta-kills those guys because they have no damage, and as a result, they're effectively useless in the back. So Hidden Passage is great. I take it all the time. I love starting with it. And it's one of the better cards in the game, in my opinion. Next up, we got Hornbreak. So 1 mana, piercing, deal 5 damage. Remember those low HP, high armor guys I just mentioned? This is for those as well. The thing with Hornbreak is I think it is strictly inferior to Hidden Passage most of the time. It can help you take out some backline mooks. However, the damage isn't that great on it, and there are much better cards for that. It's an okay card. The thing is, I would just rather have Hidden Passage because the main selling points on Hornbreak is also achieved by Hidden Passage. And with Hornbreak, you have to upgrade it too in order to kill the Steel Wings because those have 15 HP. Hidden Passage, you don't have to upgrade it to deal with the Steel Wings. So I'd rather have Hidden Passage than this card. However, this can also help kill stuff like Shade Wings in the back. But hopefully you're not having to rely on stuff like Hornbreak to deal with Shade Wings when you get to that point. Next up, we've got Molting Imp. Molting Imp is, in my opinion, one of the better imps. It kind of serves the same purpose as Vent, and which one I take really depends. It really depends. So when you summon it, it deals 5 damage to enemy units. That's that's pretty good. 5 damage is a really important number because that's how much HP Shade Wings have, and Shade Wings are some of the scariest units in the game if you can't deal with them. So if you have the space requirements, it's pretty decent. However, a lot of time you won't have the space requirements, and how much use you're getting out of the body is kind of questionable. This is another one that really comes into play with Imp Cycle. Generally, I will take this early on if I have absolutely no AoE in the deck and I'm not being offered anything else that gives AoE, then yes, I will take Molting Imp. Because AoE is very important. 5 damage is enough damage on the AoE to stay relevant for the entire run, which is a big deal. So it's a decent card. I think it's about average. Next up, we got Torch. On Covenant 25, you start with 5 of these in your deck. They're just junk. They're junk you want to get rid of, but they're better junk than some of the junk. I will say that much because on the first few floors, you can use them to snipe off collectors, which is a big deal. Some faction combos just don't have access to ways to take collectors in the early game, which really sucks. However, Hellhorned does in the form of Torch. They also one-shot pretty much every backline unit in the early game, so that's great. I think in terms of starting cards, Torch is pretty decent. It's definitely very serviceable against the human enemies, but once you start getting into the clipped enemies, it's still pretty useful actually because the clipped backliners, a lot of them have 2 HP. So Torch is still good enough there. It's once you get into a guild that the torches are just totally useless though. Usually I end up either trying to remove torches depending on the other faction I'm playing. I might want to remove their junk instead. But if it's not feasible to remove torches, I will look out for plus 20 damage and consume on them because if I can get that, I can still use them to one-shot the backline winged units. However, I don't have to worry about being in my deck for the whole fight. It just gets out of deck so that I can draw more efficient cards later on in the fight. Next up, we got Welder Helper. So, the Welder Helper is kind of an awkward card to use. Usually, you want to apply the armor to something that's not the imp. It's especially awkward on Hellhorned Umbra. On Hellhorned Umbra, the Welder Helper is very, very finicky to use. Because usually I want the imp to die eventually. However, in the case of most imps, I just stick them in front and they're gonna die that turn. With Welder Helper, I stick him in front, he gives himself the armor, and then he sticks around, and if I'm doing stuff with morsels, he eats the morsels as well, and he's just awkward to use. Outside of that, I think it's a pretty good card. However, the fact that it's much harder to get your Welder Helper dead than all the other imps is kind of a deal breaker sometimes. It's especially problematic with, well, no, because with, no, I'm not going to talk about Imp Cycle right now. Anyway, this card, it can be really good. 15 armor is a lot of armor. That's a lot of HP. You just have to be careful with it because Welder Helper, sometimes you're just going to end up in a situation where he's going to stick around for the whole fight. So be very careful with him. Always make sure that when you play your Welder Helper, you're still going to have enough capacity on that floor to do whatever you need to do there, even if the welder helper sticks around, because a lot of times he will. Finally, we got Ritual Battle. This card is bad. This card is very bad. The only times I would recommend taking this are if either A, you're running a volatile gauge build, or B, you have the split anvil. This card's very good with split anvil because it's 3 mana, so it'll reduce all your 2 and 1 mana spells to 0 mana when you play it. However, by itself, without ways to make the cost not suck so hard, this card is very, very bad. The idea of taking the whole turn just to play Ritual Bell and get 12 damage on a guy, even if it's Brawler 3 Hornbreaker Prince, it's effectively 60 damage in that case. You can just do better. It's too expensive for what it does. I would stay away from this card. It just lacks too much. You can do way better than this. So let's move on to the uncommons. First, we got Imp in a Box. So Imp in a Box, you consume it, it costs 0, and you get 2 random imps. However, the imps are not free, so this is effectively a 2 mana card if you're going to play both imps, and I hope you're not shuffling the imps back in, because that's a terrible idea. So this is a very RNG card. The imps you get are entirely random. Sometimes you'll get great imps, sometimes you'll get trash imps, sometimes you'll get completely worthless imps. It's all up to luck. So when do you take Imp in a Box? Because these are rare cards, well, actually, no, that's incorrect. You're going to start with 1 rare spell every run, a random one. So Imp in a Box is okay if you're just really all in on the Imp synergy strategy. However, the Imp synergy strategy just isn't very good in my opinion. The thing with most cards that care about imps is they only do anything if you have imps. Which is, it's not the greatest. I think this card is definitely below average. I would stay away from it unless you're already pretty deeply invested into imp stuff, or you've picked up some stuff that cares about imps, etc., etc. Next up, we got Important Work. This card is very, very good if you have the Imp Sickle. Otherwise, it's just kind of mediocre. You need a lot of imps in the deck to make this work, because if you ever draw it and you don't have an imp, you're just losing your draw. Keep in mind, this does not give you any card advantage, it just gives you mana, because you draw 1, sure, but you had to draw the Important Work, so you're already down a card. So if you don't need the mana, this card's no good. If you do need the mana, you need to make sure that you have enough imps to make this work out, because otherwise it's going to cause problems. However, if you have Imp Sickle, this card becomes very good, because suddenly, every time you draw it, you're guaranteed to get a 2 mana, and it lets you turn your garbage imps from Imp Sickle into actual cards. So it kind of is actually giving you card advantage, which is great. So card kind of compare this to the Excavated Embers you get from the one event or from that one Umbra card. It's essentially that, except you need an imp for it to work. So I think this card's very, very mediocre and probably not worth taking if you don't have Imp Sickle. However, if you do have Imp Sickle, this card suddenly becomes very, very good. Next up, we got Rage Serum. 0 mana, consume, apply Rage 3. It's okay. This is the kind of card that doesn't do a ton, but you can't expect it to do a ton because it's 0 mana. Rage 3 is effectively 6 damage that turn. If you're running the Brawler Hornbreaker Prince, this can be pretty decent. If you're not running him, this card's kind of underwhelming, and you might want to skip it in that case because there's just better stuff you can be drawing, right? So I think Rage Serum is just okay. You can take it or leave it. It's not going to be terribly offensive if you take it. Like, it's not the worst thing ever, but it's never going to be super impressive. If you have stuff that synergizes with Rage, though, this becomes a lot better. So keep that in mind. Next up, we got Branded Warrior. I don't like this card very much because it's kind of got the same problem as the old Hornbreaker Prince from before they buffed him recently, his Reaper trigger. The problem is he just doesn't quite do enough damage to get his Slay trigger very often. Baseline, he has 18 attack when you put him in. You can put upgrades on him if you put, like, I don't know, a Battlestone and a Multi-Strike on him. He's going to be doing, let's see, 23, 46 damage every turn. Well, not every turn. The first turn you play him if you don't get any Slay triggers. And that's, it's okay. I don't know if it's worth the space, though. I think the idea is you put him in the back and he kills the backline stuff. But that's not feasible on the higher levels. Like, even against a clip, that's not feasible because you need all your damage going to the frontline dudes just to kill them. So that doesn't work here. So you would have to set up so that your branded warriors gain the killing blow on the big tanky guys, and that's just not super reliable. I think there's way better things you can be doing with your space. This is a decent early game unit, but he just gets worse and worse as the game goes on. Next up, we got Horn Warrior. So he's just a vanilla dude, 1 mana for 34. He's okay. He has a lot of attack. That's kind of his big selling point. Usually, you'll be looking for an HP upgrade on him pretty early on. Like, you pick this guy after the first floor, and then you slap an HP upgrade on him, and he can usually get you through the Deadless fight with some support. And that's pretty decent. He has no scaling, though, so he kind of gets worse as the run goes on. But he's decent. I mean, he's not the greatest thing ever, but he is a pretty decent dude to ascend up behind some stuff to start floor stacking because you need a lot of units with these kinds of builds. And he's a decent one. Overall, I would take this over the Branded Warrior for sure. However, he's super vanilla, right? Like, that's his thing. He's just a vanilla guy with a lot of attack. You can put multi-strike on him and a large stone on him, and then he is pretty formidable. However, there's usually better places you can be putting your multi-strike than this. I generally take this early. If it's past like floor 2, I wouldn't bother with this because it just doesn't scale well enough. Next up, we got Impish Scholar. I'm going to go ahead and note that Impish Scholar will not appear in unit drafts. So summon and return a random consume spell to your hand. Impish Scholar is a card whose usefulness depends pretty much entirely on what consume spells you're running in the deck. If you have a lot of consume spells, the Scholar becomes really good because you can use him to tank a hit and get you back like your Wildwood Sap or whatever, or your Rage Serum, your Crystalline Seeds, whatever. He's really good in that case. However, if you're not running consume cards, he's pretty bad for obvious reasons. I would take him if you have good consume cards, otherwise stay away from him. I think he is average. Like, this card is just average. Next up, we got Impressive, which I apparently have never won with. It's probably because the car is not very good. This is another one like Important Work, where it's pretty good with the Imp Sickle. However, 1 mana for 50 damage, and it's got stipulations, is already not great. The problem with this is it's only ever hitting frontline dudes, and it only does 50 damage, so it's not that big of a deal. You can't use this to clear out backline. The 50 damage is nice against frontline stuff, but that's like against Gilded Wings, that's only going to put them down to 140 HP. So you still need to grind through that somehow. Overall, I would take this if I have an Imp Cycle, otherwise I would stay away from it. The Sacrifice Imp cards, I forgot to mention, are a decent way to make sure that your Imps aren't taking up too much space. It ensures that they die when you need them to die. And really, I just don't think this card's very good. It's kind of mediocre. I would stay away from it. Next up, we got Marcher Shields. So, 1 mana for 10 armor baseline is not great. However, moving a unit to the front with this is the only card in the game that can move a unit to the front, or move one of your own units at all on a floor. So, this card is very, very good with Hidden Passage, because what this lets you do is get the units down in the order you draw them with Hidden Passage, and then get your tank to front with the March of Shield. That's very good. This effectively increases your consistency with Hidden Passage decks, as well as giving you armor. The 10 armor is nice. And it ensures that your Hidden Passage decks aren't bricking their draws as often. Sometimes with Ascend and Descend strats, you're gonna break your draws. It happens. But March of Shields makes it so that it doesn't happen nearly as often, because it gives you a lot of lenience on the order you can play your stuff and send it. So I like this card quite a bit when I'm running a strategy that's built around Hidden Passage to an extent. Suddenly, March of Shields becomes one of the cards that I want the most. Next up, we got Pyre Chomper. 1 mana summon, gain 4 mana. So this is more of a Hellhorned Umbra card, because Hellhorned Umbra have the most expensive spells in the game. They're the only 2 clans who have cards that are printed at more than 3 cost. They also happen to have most of the X cost spells. So Pyre Chomper, if you're strapped for mana, this is very, very good. If you're not strapped for mana, this is very bad, because in that case, it's an imp that does nothing. That's kind of the case with most imps, however. So I would take this very highly in Hellhorned Umbra. Other combinations, it depends. It really depends, because like you need to really want the mana for this to be good. It becomes better when you have a lot of card draw too. It becomes good with cards like the Awoken Rail Spike, or the Stygian card that lets you discard your hand and draw 5. It's good with those kinds of cards. Generally speaking, if you take this, it better be because you need the mana. Like, you better need the mana. Otherwise, this is just gonna... Well, let me talk about it this way. Usually, either you want more mana, or you want more card draw. You rarely... Well, actually, you always want both, but if you have a lot of mana, you want more card draw. If you have a lot of card draw, you want more mana or cheaper spells. The same goes with when you have a lot of mana, you want more expensive spells. So if you have a lot of card draw or you have a lot of expensive spells, Pirate Trumper becomes really good. If you have a lot of cheap spells or no card draw, Pirate Trumper's really bad. So just keep that in mind. I think this card is pretty average. Next up, we got Rail Beater. This is one of the more complex Hellhorned cards. Hellhorned in general doesn't have very much complex stuff. Most of their things are pretty straightforward, but Rail Beater is one of the more complex ones. So there's a lot going on here. He starts with 25 armor, so he effectively has 35 HP, and when he hits a dude, he sends it to the back. So this is an interesting effect. Let's start by talking about the armor. Since he starts with 25 armor, the advantages of armor are it has synergy with some other cards that care about armor, like Battering Ram, which I'm sure we'll get to shortly. The disadvantages are armor cannot be healed in any way. If you lose armor, it's gone for good. So I think because you're Hellhorn, the armor is better than HP for fairly obvious reasons. So it's like 35 HP, but it's 35 good HP. Next up, we got the Strike effect. So this is an effect that I've thought about a lot. I've done a lot of experimenting with it, and there's a lot you can do with it. So once again, remember the guys I mentioned earlier that have no attack, a little bit of HP, and a ton of armor, and they're always in the front. Rail Beater is one way of getting around those guys. He's very good at dealing with them. However, he needs to either be in the front, be on the lower floor, or have quick. He can be in the front because he has pretty good HP, so that's great. Outside of those guys, he's always going to push the tankiest units to the back, right? So something you can do with him is you can give him quick and give another unit quick. So now you have two units with quick. You have the Rail Beater, and let's say the Rail Beater has multi-strike and quick, and you stick them towards the back. Then your Rail Beater gets to either push both tanky units to the back every time, or push a tanky unit to the back and kill an enemy backliner. Or you could give him like multi-strike and quick and another guy with quick behind him. And what that'll do is he'll send all the tanky guys to the back if there's more than one. Or he'll send a tank, like the one tanky guy to the back, kill a backline unit, and then your other quick line can kill the rest of the backline stuff. And that can be pretty alright too. Now, obviously, this is a lot of work. It is a solution to backline stuff. It's a solution to the tanky guys that's in the front. However, it's kind of a complicated solution. Generally, I would try doing this if it's looking like it's going to be a real issue dealing with that kind of stuff. However, generally, I prefer excuse me. Generally, I prefer more straightforward solutions to those kinds of things. It is notable that there's not many solutions to the zero attack tanky guys in the front, and this is one of them. So I tend to take the Rail Beater quite often just to deal with those guys because they can kill your run, especially against the winged. Like those guys, if you get a bad floor, they can end your run, and it's a big problem. And Rail Beater deals with them. So I do like the card. It's just one that has a lot of complicated use cases. If you're newer to the game, I wouldn't worry too much about Rail Beater. It's a kind of card that becomes more and more useful as you get more experience with the game. Next up, we got Steelworker. He's a 1 mana 10/15, and he gains 5 armor every turn. This is probably the bog standard Hellhorn tank. He's really good with the Rail Hammer, because that makes him gain 9 armor every turn. Generally, if I'm looking for a tanky unit, this guy will do. He will do quite nicely, in fact. You stick some HP upgrades on him, and suddenly you got a super tanky dude who is able to mitigate some of the damage he's taking, which is great. I think he is the only unit from Hellhorned I really consider as Hank. So if you're running something like Hellhorned, uh, let's say Hellhorned Burning Remnant, Steelworkers are going to be pretty important because they're like the only tank you have access to, and that's a big deal. I think this card is quite good in Hellhorn, especially because if this were like an Awoken card, it wouldn't be nearly as good because Awoken just has a lot of tanks. But since it's a Hellhorn card, it's very good here because it covers up one of the faction's biggest weaknesses, being their front line. Next up, we got Alpha Fiend. So when he strikes, he gains +3 attack, and he's 2 mana and takes up 3 space. So the mana and space requirements are kind of sucky. However, the effect here is pretty good. Generally, what I like to do with these is stick them in Ascend builds. They're pretty good there because when you do that, the capacity requirement doesn't matter. The strike effect is nice, especially when you get multi-strike on the Alpha Fiend. Like, when I pick up Alpha Fiend, multi-strike becomes one of my biggest priorities for him. Usually, I'll end up doing something like multi-strike plus Battlestone to make him a little bit tankier and give him a bit more starting attack. And this is just a way to help scale over the course of the fight. Like, this is going to help a lot dealing with the boss. However, it's not a great strategy for dealing with the trash. And that's kind of what makes the card a bit worse, in my opinion. Against the later fights where your strategy needs to be coming together, like all your cards need to be making sense, Alpha Fiend is not the greatest because the Gilded Wings need to die right now. However, the Alpha Fiend needs time to build up, which kind of sucks. So I would take this as a way of scaling to make sure I can kill the boss, that I have enough damage to kill the boss. However, if I do that, I need to be making extra sure that I have more bursty front-loaded damage to deal with the frontline tanks that are going to get thrown at me. Next up, we got Branding Right. This is a card that's essentially a modal card. It's either hit one of your units for 5 and do 20 armor, or kill an enemy unit with 5 or less HP. So, double stack's very nice on this because it makes the card way more efficient. Overall, I do like this card quite a bit because it's pretty flexible. It lets you do some pretty nice stuff. Keeps your units alive, helps clear out backline stuff. The 2 mana is kind of a problem because it's very expensive. However, you stick some upgrades on this and it becomes a really good card. Overall, I think this is pretty average when it comes to Hellhorned rare cards. Or not rare cards, uncommon cards. And I'll take it sometimes I'll leave it. It really just depends on what I'm looking for. Enflame is kind of sucky. I do not like this card. Generally, it's okay with double stack. However, I just don't like Rage very much as a thing. If you're taking this, you had better have some artifacts or other cards that synergize with Rage, otherwise it's just not worth it. It's too expensive for what it does. I'd rather have Branding Right for the armor or something else. mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense because this is giving a dude 5 armors, which implies you want it on a frontline guy, but it's giving rage 4, which implies you want a backline guy. I don't care for this card. It leaves a lot to be desired. I rarely take it. Tiresome Climb. I think Tiresome Climb is significantly worse than Ascend because Tiresome Climb is just less flexible and more expensive. You can use this to ascend your guys, but if you're doing that, then it it's dazing them, which really sucks. So you're just using this on enemies, right? And it costs 2. The thing is, it just doesn't have the flexibility that Hidden Passage brings to the table, and that makes it the worst card in my opinion. If you have an Iron Drop Cage, though, any form of Ascend or Descend suddenly becomes way better, so it's worth taking in that case. However, usually when I take this card, it's like I would just rather have Hidden Passage. Hidden Passage is so much better than this. It can, like, if you put Holdover on it, you can use it to mitigate some nice damage, but that's a lot of resources for Tiresome Climb. I don't care much for this card. I would rather have Hidden Passage, and Hidden Passage is way easier to get anyway. Next up, we got Battering Ram, which I've never won with. So, I think if this card costs 2 instead of 3, it would be very good. However, it costs 3, and that's just too much mana. So it deals damage to the front enemy unit equal to 4 times the amount of armor on friendly units. The problem is, usually you're going to be want to putting your armor on your frontline guy, and as a result, you're going to be losing armor over time. Maybe this is a bit better with the new Wrathful Hornbreaker Prince. Maybe it's good there. I don't know. But overall, I don't like this card. The effect is good. Don't get me wrong. The effect is good, but the mana cost is just too much. There's much better, cheaper ways to deal with frontline guys than this. To kill a Gilded Wing with this, you would need roughly 50 armor, which isn't a huge amount, but it's not a little bit of armor either. Hypothetically, I think maybe you could do something where you have the Wrathful Hornbreaker Prince sing in the back, gaining armor off slay triggers that way, and then have like a -1 cost holdover Battering Ram to deal with frontline stuff. Like, that kind of build could be cool. Maybe I'll try that. But outside of very specific combos, the card is just too clunky. Mana cost is very high. Don't care for it much. Next up, we got Inferno. I think this card is very, very good. Good enough, in fact, that sometimes I'll look for holdover on it and minus cost, because the question with Inferno is, are we using every floor? And if we're not, which floor are we not using? If that floor is the bottom floor, or even the middle floor, then Inferno's an insane card. 100 damage to every enemy and friendly unit on the floor. If you just don't have friendly units on that floor, it's great. It's kind of like Crushing Demise from Melting Remnant, which we'll talk about in a future video. I take this card quite highly. Not only does it deal with the backline trash, it also really chunks the frontline stuff. In fact, before you get to winged fights, this just straight up kills the frontline stuff too, except for the Clipped Guardians who have 105 HP, it doesn't quite kill them. I think this card's very good. I take it if I'm running an Ascend strat, or I'm just not using one of my lower floors or something like that. Then this card is spectacular. Finally, we got Demon Fiend. So 4 mana, 50/50, 3 capacity. Obviously, 4 mana is more than you start with, so you need to either get extra mana from a boss artifact or have a way in your deck of producing extra mana, or a Voltel Gauge or a Plans of Salvation. Those are the ways you're going to be getting the Demon Fiend out. I think that for the floor capacity it takes up, the 50/50 base stat line is very, very good. The mana requirement is obviously the limiting factor here. And generally, this is a card I'll take if either A, I already have a way I know for sure that I can cheese it out, or B, I already have enough mana to get into play. If it's early game and this shows up in like my first unit draft and I have no ways of getting it into play for free or to cheese out mana, this card's very, very bad because you really, really need your units in the early game to be doing something. Otherwise, Dell is just going to kill you. So only take it if you can already play it. Taking it speculatively might work on earlier Covenant levels. However, at Covenant 25 or even like 20 plus, it's just no good. Don't do that. It will lose you to run. You need all your cards in the early game to be doing something. You can't just put these bricks in your deck. But if you can play this reliably, then it's a very good card. Now let's move on to rare cards. Okay, Spike of the Hellhorned is very, very underwhelming. You would need a ton of mana to make this good. I think the only real time I would take this card is if I have the artifact that adds 3 to it, then it's okay, I guess. But by itself, it's just so underwhelming. If you pump 3 mana into this, you're getting 6 rage and 6 armor. Compare that to Inflame, which costs 2 mana. I guess it's about on par with Inflame, huh? Actually, no, it's a bit worse than Inflame in that case, because if you pump 2 mana into it, you're getting 1 less armor. This card is just so mediocre. It's one of the worst rail. It's the second worst rail spike in my opinion. I don't really take it. I don't like it. It's just so mediocre. Next up, we got Dark Deal, which somehow I've never won with. I don't know how. I think this card is very good. So, deal 5 damage to the thing, apply 7 rage. So this is a modal card. Either you're using it to kill a backline dude for free, which is great, or you're using it to apply rage 7 to one of your guys for 0. This is the best rate you're going to get on rage effects in the game, because other ways to produce rage just don't have this kind of efficiency. The 5 damage isn't that much. It's not a huge deal. If you get double stack on this, it can be way better. In general, I don't think the rage spells are very good, but this is the best one in my opinion. I take this card quite highly. Usually I'll take it over most of these other rares because Hellhorned have a lot of very mediocre rares. So this is one of my favorite Hellhorned rares. I take it quite highly. I don't know how I've never won with it though. That's kind of strange. Next we got Alloy of the Ancients. 1 mana, consume, apply 25 armor. 25 armor is a lot of armor for 1 mana. March of Shield only gives you 10. This consumes. You can use the Impish Scholar to get it back, which is great. This is also a Hellhorned rare that I really like. I think it's one of the better ones, and I take it quite highly. Like, if I'm being offered this, unless there's something that I'd rather have instead next to it, I'm taking it for sure. This is a card I'll never skip. It's very good. There's not a ton to talk about here, though. I mean, it's just 25 armor. It's pretty straightforward. Next up, we got Deranged Brute. Rage on friendly units adds an additional +2 attack per stack. Okay, so the Ranged Brute is it's okay. It's okay. I think it's actually better with Stygian because of Nameless Siren. All this stuff that really cares about Rage from Hellhorned is kind of awkward because Hellhorned units themselves don't have a lot of good ways to produce Rage. However, stuff like Nameless Siren from Stygian has very good ways to produce Rage. So by himself, the stat line's okay. This is a decent rate for 1 mana and 2 capacity. You can make him bigger. Like, really, you can do whatever with his body. It's pretty vanilla. Uh, Putting the Rage upgrade on him is obviously pretty good because he benefits from his own effect with that. However, how good he is just depends on how good the stuff you have that produces Rage is. I think the best card to combo him with, as I've already said, is the Nameless Siren. He's really good with her. In Hellhorned by itself, though, I think he's just okay. The Rage cards in general are not the best. However, he does make them a lot better, and he's good enough, I think, to take speculatively, and then take other Rage cards more highly because you have him in the deck. Next up, we got Impalate. This card's bad. I'm just gonna say it. Impalate is no good because the whole imp strategy is kind of sucky in general, and like the way imps are good is with Imp Sickle. However, Impalate doesn't work with Imp Sickle, which sucks. 1 mana for 15 times the number of imps in your deck to the front M unit. Usually, I can expect this to do anywhere from 30 to 60 damage for 1 mana. It's okay, but it's not the best ever. And the fact that you need to put imps in your deck for this to be good, it just really kind of sucks. You can take this if you start with a lot of imps. If you have a lot of imp stuff going on that's not Imp Sickle, because that doesn't work, then Impalate can be pretty good. However, it's just kind of mediocre. It's mediocre. It's not that interesting. There's just better cards, I think, that don't have weird stipulations. Next up, we got Transcendent. So this is, for the most part, just going to be repeating the triggers from your imps. However, there are some other things that this works with. This works with the hollows, the Awoken and the Thorn Hollow from the Awoken. And also, get this, this works with Architect Penumbra, because that's a summon effect. So, there's some really interesting stuff you can do with the Transcendent. There really is. For the most part, you're just going to be running him in Imp strats. He's okay there. You can get him off the Imp Sickle, which is pretty decent. That's usually where I end up finding him. However, this is also a card that I would definitely pick up in Umbra if I'm running Architect because of that synergy. I think as a card in your deck, that's the best synergy you have with Transcendent. Because, like, at max level, that's +4 capacity. It's effectively +3 because the Transcendent takes up one of it. but that's really solid if you can make use of it. So that's one synergy that I think you should keep in mind. The synergy with the awoken stuff never really matters because, like, you're not gonna heal your Transcendent up to that max HP. It just doesn't matter. But if you're running a lot of Imps, he's good. If you get him off Imp Sickle, he's really good because it's just more free value. And with Architect Penumbra, I think he's also really good. Next up, oh, also apparently I've never won with him, but I think I have won with him. It was just off of Imp Sickle. Next up, we got Last Stand. Um, doubles amount of rage on friendly units. This one it's kind of similar to the Range Brute, where strangely it's better with Nameless Siren than any of the Hellhorn stuff you'd be doing with Rage. But overall, I feel like this is not the best card. It's just too expensive is the problem again. It's very expensive, and you have to already have Rage. And if you don't have Rage or you don't have a lot of Rage, this is just 3 mana, do nothing. The cost on the card kind of kills it because it's 3 mana. You would think you would want to run it with stuff like a Volatile Gauge. However, in Volatile Gauge decks, usually you're not running much Rage, is the thing. So you would need a critical mass of Rage in the first place for this to be good. But that just doesn't happen very often. And like the odds of having a run where you hit this critical mass of rage and then you're offered the Last Stand is just so small. Taking this before you hit the critical mass of rage is a terrible idea because if you do that, it's just a brick in your deck that's not doing anything. I haven't won with this card. It's because I don't think this card is very good, and I pretty much never take this. Next up, we got Reinforce. Consume doubles armor on a unit. This, it's not very good either. Like, these doubling effects just aren't very good in my opinion because usually you're going to be losing armor fast in the later parts of the game. You're going to be losing it real fast. And this again falls into the problem of costing too much mana. It's just too much mana for the effect. You can reduce it down to 1 mana with upgrades, or you could just put those upgrades in other spells, which are better. The problem is, once again, it's 3 mana, and you need to hit a critical mass of armor for it to do anything. So, it's got all the same problems as Last Stand. By the time, like, the odds of you hitting this critical mass of armor and then being offered the Reinforce are just tiny. Taking the Reinforce before you have the armor, then it's just a brick in your deck once again, which is really bad. So this is one I tend to stay away from as well. I took it a few times. I won with it once, but overall it's not been very impressive. Next up, we got One Horn's Tome. Okay, so obviously this card costs 5 mana, but it gives a dude multi-strike. And you can put double stack on this, give a dude multi-strike too. There's a few really good places to put One Horn's Tome. The first one is you pick this up early and you're going down the Reaper route with the Hellhorned champion, the Hornbreaker Prince. Like, you're heading towards Reaper 3. You stick a double stacked One Horn's Tome on the Prince with Reaper, and he just turns into a monster. Like this, that's all the damage you need ever. Additionally, if you have a Volatile Gauge run going on, or you're playing in conjunction with Umbra, Hellhorned Umbra is very good with all this expensive stuff because they have most of the ways to cheese out mana and most of the expensive cards as well. So cards like this become much better there. If you're running Volatile Gauge, this is very good. If you're not running Volatile Gauge, however, you're running something like the Reaper Hornbreaker Prince, then you can just reduce the cost on this, and it may take up your whole turn, but I think it's worth it because it pretty much solves your single target damage for the whole fight. I like this card quite a bit. It is very expensive. However, I think unlike some of these other cards, the cost is justified. Finally, actually, oh, okay. Finally, we got Consumer of Crowns. So, the Consumer of Crowns costs -3 per imp in play, and it's a 10 mana 140. I'm just gonna say right off the bat, I don't think I've ever cast this off the cost reduction from the imps. It's never happened. Even with Imp Sickle, it's just never happened because what happens is the draw order is just no good most of the time. Something will happen like I'll draw the Consumer of Crowns on turn 1, and at that point I have no imps, and there's just no way I'm going to play it, or I'll draw the imps, but something happens to them, or I'll draw the imps, but then I just never draw the Consumer of Crowns. It's just too unreliable. What is reliable, however, is getting this out either with Plans of Salvation or Volatile Gauge. This is a card that's kind of a poster child for the Volatile Gauge decks, and it's also kind of a important card in the Hellhorned Umbra decks for reasons I've already kind of gone over. It's the most expensive card in the game on its print line, and the stat line is okay. You kind of want more than 40 HP on this. Usually I'll either go I'll try to go double strike quick or double strike plus HP on this. It just needs a bit more HP, but if you can get Plans of Salvation or Volta Gauge, it makes getting this dude out way easier. And if you get this dude out, he is just a beast. So overall, I do like Hellhorn. They're kind of basic. I think that they are just dead average in terms of how powerful each faction is. They're like right in the middle. So that's gonna conclude this video. Next time we're gonna be going over all the Awoken cards, which are also pretty basic. Hellhorned is just the bog standard aggressive faction. Awoken's the bog standard tanky faction. And I'll see you guys next time when we go over the Awoken cards. Peace out.